following discussion is for educational purposes only and is not intended to diagnose or treat any disease. Please do not apply any of this information without first speaking with your doctor.
What is up, everyone, and welcome to the Diabuddies podcast, where we discuss how to take control of your health and gain the freedom to live the life that you deserve. I'm Garrett, Panno, and with me is my co-host, Dr. Grady Donohoe, who is a board-certified chiropractic internist. All right, and welcome back to Diabuddies, to another episode. Today is Dr. Grady and myself, no guests, and today we're going to be talking about leg day. So welcome back, and we are excited to have your ear once again and just share the space and share things that really matter. So
yeah, I think we're both excited to talk about, some things that we love to do, which is working out, and specifically leg day. I think we both really like leg day, and hopefully we can help people navigate leg day successfully, whether that's dealing with blood sugar. We'll probably be talking mostly about blood sugar and how to navigate different types of leg days and workouts around that. But yeah, I think it's gonna be fun to get into it.
Absolutely. And I ended up doing a little bit of legs myself today, but as of today, when we were recording this, it's beginning of November. And so, it's November 2nd right now, and November is Diabetes Awareness Month. So congratulations to all the diabetics out there this is our month. We made it in 2020 somehow, but we made it to month 11. And obviously this month is really important to, there's more fuel to the fire in terms of sharing things about diabetes, sharing your experiences. Hopefully we can continue to have more conversations here on this podcast and just interact with people in a way that really helps with this month and just more diabetes awareness in general. And so this month is just really, really important to spread the word about, your personal experience, whether that's you sharing it with coworkers, you sharing it with family members, you interacting with other diabetics on social media, or even us here on this podcast, So this is a really, really cool month that I do really enjoy. It's the most excited I've ever been for like a diabetes awareness month. I don't know about you, but I think I'm actually excited for things to happen throughout this month.
Yeah. It's always nice to feel that community, and because, depending on your situation, some people feel very alone with their diabetes because they may not know anybody around them. So seeing more on social media and interacting more with people, I think is very healthy for everybody as far as their mindset goes, and just, living life with diabetes.
Yeah. And, today I got an email from the American Diabetes Association because, I subscribe to their email list. And, when I started getting more motivated to try to be involved in a diabetes space was probably in 2017, when I was raising money for the ADA and for doing that marathon. And at that point in 2017, the ADA was predicting by 2050, 1 in 3 people are going to be diabetic. Doesn't matter type 1 or type 2. And at that point, there was 29 million diabetics in the United States. So this is 3 years ago, right? Here in 2020 now, there is, as of 31 million. So in the course of 3 years, there is that giant increase in diagnosis and diabetes in the country. And so I think it's like 1 in 10, I think is what the email was saying, that I read this morning. But more shockingly was that because of those diabetics that are insulin dependent, 1 in 4 are rationing insulin.
Wow. That's
like, yeah, crazy. It doesn't even begin to describe it. Yeah. So I don't know. That was just something I saw today, when I was kind of checking my email in the beginning of work, and I was just like, wow, that is a wild statistic. 1 in 4 insulin dependent ration their insulin.
Mm-hmm.
So the conversations we have this month and conversations we continue to have are always important. So continue to be loud and proud about being diabetic. So anyways, random tangent already, not even like 5 minutes in. All right, but squatting, right? So today I was squatting and doing some overhead squat myself, but I think what we wanted to talk about is not necessarily just experiences, and maybe you and I, Grady, we'll share experiences throughout these in terms of like specific like lifting events if we can remember, but almost like what would you do? You know, what would you do in this scenario, right? So, Grady, I want to ask you, you know, almost from the basic, you know, the perfect situation is if you're going into, first let's almost like define like what a leg day is, right? Like what in your mind, Grady, what define like what a strength training leg day is versus maybe like a max out or like a casual leg day. Like what are those, if anything, differences between those if you're working, going to the gym, lifting legs, doing leg workouts? What do those 3 or 2 things mean?
Yeah, so I'm gonna have a long answer to this question because there's a lot to unpack just with that question right there. And so I would say right now, I'll kind of go through my different types of leg days that I do right now, but then I'll get into the type of leg days that are out there. So right now, I keep it very similar as far as the amount of exercises that I do, the amount of reps, and the amount of sets that I do. So for the most part, that all stays the same. The only difference is the types of exercises. So I have certain leg days where they are harder, more intense. I have a bigger response to them, whether that be metabolically or blood sugar wise. And so those harder ones and bigger response days, those are typically going to include the bigger lifts, the lifts that incorporate, for the most part, a large majority of your body, not just your legs. So like back squats is a big one for me. Also deadlifts. Those two are usually the big foundational ones. So I don't usually do those on the same day. I did do that in the past, and that didn't work out too well for me because my core got tired, and then bad things happened. So I split those up now. So back squat and deadlift are my 2 big lifts that I'll usually do on my harder days. And then from there, it kind of tapers down a little bit, but that kind of sets the tone. And so with those bigger lifts where I lift generally heavier weight, and it takes more effort whole body wise to do those things, then obviously that's going to have a bigger impact overall on the body. And so I'm using, especially with those 2 lifts, it's hard to really isolate whether you're using mostly hamstring, mostly quads. With deadlifts, you're probably going to get more hamstrings and posterior chain muscles than you are with back squat. But for the most part, both of those, you're going to get a heavy dose of both quads and hamstrings. So basically front and back of the legs. And so hitting both of those big muscle groups is going to have a big impact on your body metabolically and just kind of overall going to have a big impact. And so my lighter leg days are going to be easier things. So things like um, lunges or maybe leg press where that takes out the upper body. It's only legs. Things like that where it's fairly simple. Even like hip thrusts or glute bridges. Those types of things where it's really focusing heavily on the legs and there's really not a whole lot of upper body component to it. If I have a workout with most of those in there, then it's usually an easier workout. I get through it much quicker because it's not as gruesome and wears me down as much. And so at the same time with those, I generally don't have as big a response with it. But I'd say overall leg day, no matter what type it is going to have a bigger impact on my body, whether blood sugar or metabolically, than say if I'm doing mainly upper body type stuff. So in general, leg day for me has a pretty big response. Now, yeah, go ahead and ask your question.
I was gonna say, yeah. So that's because, correct me if I'm wrong, your legs, that those muscle fibers are so long, they're so big. The mitochondrial content, it's so responsible of holding you upright that when you go and have your effort on that, it's going to create a bigger demand metabolically on you. And therefore, in a non-diabetic, your body would have the regulation to try to use hormones, use glucagon, insulin, epinephrine, cortisol, all these things simultaneously to keep your blood sugar level, like as in any situation, but it's adapting, but it's increasing the demand of effort. But because as if you're insulin dependent, like you and I and many people are, it's going to take more planning and more effort to that, therefore have strategies around if you're doing maximal effort leg day compared to maybe if you were even the leg day. Do you notice that you said you do notice a difference in like a casual leg day versus just like a casual upper body workout?
Yeah, like even on a casual leg day, I'm gonna have for me, I'll have a bigger drop in blood sugar than with an even a higher intensity upper body day compared to my lower intensity lower body day. It's
Mm-hmm.
not even close. So on leg day, sometimes I'll eat beforehand, or if I eat beforehand, maybe I don't take as much insulin. Whereas on a upper body day, I pretty much, for the most part, take exactly the same amount as if I hadn't worked out. Um, so it definitely has a noticeable difference, whether it's um, casual or more intense.
Mm-hmm. And you saying that real fast made me think of, because now that we're talking about lifting on this episode in particular, when we talk about fuel or when we go in commentary on fuel, we're not. It's not from the standpoint of a diet in any means. It's like the food you should eat for the majority of people should be to fuel your workouts, fuel your body in recovery, and not be in a calorie restriction mindset of 2,000 calories, 15,000, 1,000 calories,
Mm-hmm.
3,000 calories. When to somebody who is an experienced lifter, or maybe you're not lifting a lot and you're trying to get in the gym more, uh, you know, the fuel you need is just the fuel you need. Food is fuel. And so you should think about it that way. And when you're planning, like you're saying, the insulin you need, maybe you eat beforehand. You're doing that because there's a demand on your body, and you're then satisfying that demand with the fuel or with the food. And that's how
Mm-hmm.
it should be viewed, opposed to a calorie restricted mindset for most people.
Yeah.
I just kind of want to almost went on that tangent, just because if we're talking about lifting, people associate lifting with bodybuilding, and therefore not eating a lot, and rice and broccoli and chicken, and that's all you eat. Like
Mm-hmm.
that's not necessarily. I don't even. Well, that's because you wouldn't eat rice, but but the point being made is that we're not going to be talking a lot about diet and food today, but I just wanted to make the comment, when we do, just think of it purely as a objective thing that we're using, opposed to some model that we're following.
Mm-hmm.
So
Yeah. Yeah. And so let's get into the other types of leg days, which would, um, in my way of thinking, I've had experiences with very different types of leg days. So right now, my sets and reps are usually 3 sets, sometimes 4 sets, depending on how I'm feeling, of 10 reps. I keep it at 10 reps because for me, that keeps my ego in check so I don't go too heavy and then hurt myself. So I keep it at 10 reps. And now, when I used to do a lot of powerlifting or really heavy lifting training for football and sports and whatnot, I had varying different types of leg days. And so um, on the days where I would have low reps and really heavy weight, um, that was it's very interesting when you're doing that type, because you're going to be taking much longer breaks in between those, but at the same time you're creating a lot of maximal effort in those sets. So it seems like it's very low intensity or very relaxed and chill, but at the same time, it's pretty brutal and pretty hard on your body. So in those types of leg days, man, I'll see like literally, I mean, it'll take you an hour just to do back squats because you're taking so long of breaks in between, and you're kind of pushing yourself to see how far you can go. So it can take like an hour and a half, crazy long time just to do one exercise. And so in those cases, I've had my blood sugar just tank on me because my body's putting out a max effort, not necessarily really high intensity as far as it's go 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 go, but it's like a hard go, rest, hard go, and it's like that for an hour and a half. And so I'll have my blood sugar. I used to, when I did that, would have it tank on me like pretty hard. Like I would be doing maximal effort, like low reps, 3 reps, 1 to 3 reps, and I'd go and check my blood sugar after like say the third set, and it'd be like crashing to like 40s and 30s. And so it can be deceiving. You can look at it and say, well, I'm doing a lot of resting, I shouldn't really have to worry about it, but it's a really high intensity in that moment on your muscles, and so it can have a really, really big response with that.
Yeah, so in those responses, you can think about it this way, or you shouldn't rather think about it this way. High intensity in terms of like a strength training workout doesn't mean you're huffing and puffing
Yeah.
necessarily. It doesn't mean like what you would think of when you watch commercials or movies where you're just out of breath because you're going so hard. That's a different type of workout. There, you're breathing heavy because you're creating a higher oxygen demand because the cells in your body are trying to be firing at a much faster rate. And so this has to do everything with your metabolic rate, and therefore then you're trying to catch up. That's literally what your body's trying to do at that moment, where when you're taking those breaks that you describe right now, you have all the time for oxygen consumption. That's not the issue.
Mm-hmm.
But you're damaging your muscles and you're purposely breaking them down. And then it's so hard because then the body then is using hormones and then stability of your metabolism to then recover. And that's where the demand comes from. You're not going to see drastic changes in heart rate and heart rate variability in a workout like that, where you would see a lot of heart rate variability change in a running workout, where you're huffing and puffing, where a strenuous leg day, your heart rate variability isn't going to and heart rate isn't going to change a whole lot, but it's still going to be impacting the actual muscles, just not your cardiovascular and breathing systems.
Yeah, it's going to be impacting your muscles and glucose metabolism because, like I said, you're putting out a ton of effort, and that effort takes fuel, which is glucose in the body. And so you're going to be soaking up and you're burning up a lot of glucose in that short moment there, that maximal effort moment there. And so you still have to then replenish that. So whether it's your liver glycogen, in other cells, and if you start running out, then your blood sugar is going to start tanking. So that's something to keep in mind. And then the other end of that spectrum is then like your traditional high intensity interval type training, where you're taking, for the most part, pretty short breaks in between sets, and you're just gonna go hard, and really high intensity. So like circuit type training, whether you think of that as CrossFit or whatever, but it's very much boom, 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 and going. And that one, for me, has the same very similar response, to where obviously it's going to be tanking it really quickly because you're going to be burning up a lot of glucose really fast. And so it has a very similar effect, just probably maybe a little bit more immediate, just because it is such a go in that moment. Whereas in the low sets, or the low reps and sets, is going to maybe take a little bit longer because it's over a little bit longer amount of time, but it's still going to have a very similar drop in my blood sugar.
Yeah, so these different types of workouts are that important to keep in mind, because these are all different variations of the same title of leg day, right? And this isn't even including running, because then running and bicycling and more cardiovascular heavy is still technically then leg day, right? Like you do a run and your quads be on fire, your calves be on fire, and when you're running, it's more vastus lateralis, or the outside part of your quads, versus bicycling, which is the inside part of your quads, or, vastus medialis, So those are all going to use your quads and your legs all very differently. We're not even talking about that at this point. We're just talking about a strenuous lift of the legs right now in various combinations, and not even talking about scenarios, which we'll go into now. So, but those things are important to know as you're trying to experiment with yourself, figure out what you need to do and why responses are the way they are. Like we've always harped on, getting data on yourself is super important, and this is no exception. If anything, more of an exception, like not exception, just more of a reason to do so, because you can directly see so much faster the results of why things are different if you make a mental note, or even better, actually keeping a log, which I've done plenty of times, of how that workout was different, what happened, and learning from that way. So knowing that there's variability in these types of workouts are really important before even just diving into the scenarios we're about to go into.
Yep.
So that being said, let's say, Grady, almost like from the standpoint, most of these scenarios will be from a higher strenuous leg day. So whether you're going in, you're going to put a lot of effort in, not necessarily a HIIT workout, but it's just going to affect your blood sugar. So whether that means lower reps, high weight, or moderate in there, but you just know you're going to be putting a lot of your energy into it. Okay. So that being said, let's go with the perfect scenario. Let's go with your stable blood sugar at like 100, 120 milligrams per deciliter for, let's say, an hour plus. So you at least have an hour of stability going on into the workout. Do we want to throw sleep in there if you just woke up or not? No, let's not. We're not.
Nah.
No, because that adds a different element to it too. But let's just say you're stable for an hour and you're around 100, 120, and you're heading into the big day. So what do you do? What's your strategy? You and I are both pump users, and we can comment on what maybe a non-pump user would do, which you might actually be able to answer better than me, because I'm so finicky with my pump comparatively to you. So you'll be a pretend MDI user. I'll be a pretend pump user in these scenarios. And well, so what do you do? You're going into leg day, you're stable, 100, 120, high effort. What do you do? How do you approach that scenario there?
Yeah. So let's also maybe preface, because with the sleep thing, if you just woke up, let's also preface the fact that you have eaten that day. So that, to me, provides more stability in that context, because if you haven't eaten yet and then you go and work out, it's going to have a much different response. So for me, so for me, if I've eaten already and I have a 120 blood sugar that's very level for an hour, and I go into it, then I'm probably going to keep it at that and not mess with it too much until I feel like I need to. So I'll do my warm up and everything, and get my body warmed up, and usually that's going to be just kind of some band stuff and getting the body kind of loosened up, getting the blood flowing a little bit, so that way I don't go into some heavy lifting really cold. And then I'll do my warm up sets, where I'll do pretty lightweight and then working my way up. Now once I get to my working sets, I'll do probably one working set and then or two, and then at that point, depending on how I feel, I may check my blood sugar again, because that's, at least for me, that can be where my blood sugar starts to then drop, depending on how hard I've already gone. So like, some days you feel really good, and that heavy weight that was supposed to be heavy, it feels really good. So for the most part, you feel pretty fine, and it doesn't affect you as much. So on those days, I'll just kind of keep going as long as I feel good. But around that time is maybe when my blood sugar might be starting to drop. So I'll check it again. Now, sometimes I'll feel the drop before it actually drops super low. So what I mean by that is it'll start dropping, but it won't be at that low level yet, because if you have a sharp drop, a lot of times just by dropping sharply, you will feel low type symptoms. So you could be, at 200, and then you drop really fast to 150, and you're at 150 and you're fine, but you feel low because of that sharp drop. So so in that case, if I'm at that 120 mark, then that's kind of like a good spot to be at, and I feel the drop, then I'm going to check my blood sugar and make sure I'm okay. If I have dropped, like say I'm at 120, or I was at 120 and I dropped to 100, that's technically a really good blood sugar, but I know, hey, I'm on that downslope and I'm doing leg day, so it's going to keep going down. So at that point, I'll drink one of my juice boxes, which is about 25 grams of sugar or carbohydrates, and that will help keep me up, or at least save me from dropping too low. And so that way, obviously, with legs like squatting, if you're putting a lot of effort into that, then you don't want to be lightheaded going into that, so because bad things can happen to that. So I'll try and catch that drop before it drops. Sometimes I don't always catch it, so sometimes it's already dropping a lot faster than I was expecting, and so you have to drink a juice box and maybe wait a little bit longer than you want to. But for the most part, that's how I handle a normal situation.
Gotcha. So your strategy is to test, maybe once you're actually doing your lift, after so amount of time of warm up, right? So you're already using your body, using your muscles, and then you test, and then you kind of just have a juice box when needed. When you see a slope, a high or a low slope, a steep slope. I don't know math. I don't know what the proper term would be. Negatives and numbers, but you're dropping fast, you might have a juice, or you see a trend where you might have a juice box. That's kind of, it's like, you're stable, because you've eaten, and you're just going to kind of dip low. So it's like only a question then of when are you having the juice box? Essentially, is that the strategy then?
For the most part, like sometimes I can make it all the way through without a juice box. Like for example, if I eat a decent amount of like meat with a decent amount of fat in it, then sometimes that's enough to keep my blood sugar pretty stable throughout the whole thing, because especially if with that fat component, because with me it'll kick in like 2 hours later. So if I time it right, sometimes I can get by with not having to take a juice box at all. um, so depending on the meal beforehand, I may be able to avoid it. But if it's been a while, um, and it wasn't necessarily a big heavy meal, then it's likely, especially if it's going to be an intense leg day, it's likely that I'll have to drink a juice box sometime during that workout.
Gotcha. And that's if you're a diabetic, you're type 1, and you're afraid to bring food into the gym, screw anybody else that thinks weird of you otherwise.
Yeah.
You got to do what you got to do. I almost love specifically eating or drinking to a no eating or drinking side, because I'm diabetic. Like, so you got to do what you got to do. If you got to bring a small bag with you in a gym, or if you just carry a lot of stuff with you when it comes to this workout, that's what you got to do. That's kind of our lives. But it doesn't mean that you can't do the workout. And then, because this is a medical condition, it's literally your life, feel free to do what you got to do. And anybody tries to give you lip, give them the middle finger and outlift them anyways.
Exactly.
I'm not even lifting right now when my testosterone's going up. I would have a similar approach, but you kind of use of like, you're not changing your insulin, you're going to using food to mitigate it. That's probably what an MDI user would think about it, right? Like, even though you have a pump, you're pretty like almost MDI minded with your pump.
Yep.
Where I am so like robotic with my pump. I love messing with basal rates. I love messing with the actual pump settings in various types of workouts, which make it confusing, because then your way is more straightforward in a way, and it's more controls, less variables, so it's easier to learn, right? Not saying mine's harder, like, because it's harder. The way I choose to manage my diabetes, that ends up creating more variables and therefore more challenges, right? So what I mean by that is, if I were going in that scenario, I was perfect. I'd say, great. I probably don't need to mess with my food intake or my insulin, but I do know that I will eventually drop, right? If I know I'm stable, I've been up for a while, I have food in me, and I'm stable for an hour, and I start lifting, I know I will go low. So you can use your basal rates if you're a pump. Now, I'm experienced with a Medtronic pump. I'm sure with the Tandem, and I'm not sure about Omnipod. I don't think you can mess with Omnipod the same way you can mess with a Tandem and a Medtronic pump. I could be wrong about that. Probably should know, but I don't from my own personal experience. So anyways, you can mess with basal rates. And the reason why that's an effective strategy is because when you are working out, you are increasing your heart rate, even if it's only by 10 to 15, 20 beats per minute, right? So the insulin, when your heart rate's higher, your insulin's going to be flowing in your body at a faster rate and be utilized at a different rate, which means the more you change the concentration of insulin in your blood, the more, or it's rather, the more you change the insulin concentration in your blood and the more it moves in your body, the quicker the effect will be.
Mm-hmm.
So that's a explanation to say you can use basal rates, change it for a workout, and have a quicker response than if you were just changing your basal rates and not working out.
Mm-hmm.
So for me going into that, I would probably say, maybe 15 minutes in, I would check my blood sugar. And if I feel like I'm kind of stable, I might change my basal rate to like 90%. Still pretty close to what I'm getting, but enough to lower it to kind of start mitigating a low drift, But if I see if I'm going fast, maybe I would have a glucose tabs, or you could even say, if 15 minutes in I haven't changed, but I feel like I'm about to, I might do a more drastic, maybe like a 70% basal rate change. And then that will kind of mitigate that slope. Now, that would be my strategy. And you can experiment with those percentages. And because I think percentages are easier to deal with than your actual basal rate, the actual number. Because it's easier to think about a fraction of what you normally have opposed to the number. In my opinion. But I would change just ever so slightly, 15 minutes in, before I actually start drifting lower, dipping low, to try to combat that. And if I do it perfectly, I'll be stable the whole way without consuming calories. So that's almost like the advantage then of messing with the pump, is if you aren't trying to consume more calories with lows and whatever else, if that matters to you, you don't have to, because you can change your insulin basal rates and not have to consume some kind of carb source. So I would do a slight change, maybe 15 minutes in if needed, and just always, but yeah, this requires more checking. You just, for me, I'm always checking, and that way I can moment to moment change my basal rates, so that's the side of that.
Yeah, it requires, like I said, more checking, and then also you need to have data going into it to know how your body responds to those types of exercises that you're going to be doing, because you kind of have to foresee what you typically have as a response, so that way you can accurately change those basal rates, so that way you're getting a good level graph versus you don't really know much about your body and how it reacts to certain things because you haven't been checking or plotting. And so you're like, oh, it's starting to go down a little bit, I'm gonna go 50%, and then by the end of the workout you're super high now, or maybe vice versa, it wasn't enough and you kept dropping. So yeah, it's something you need lots and lots of data on, but it's definitely a good strategy if you do have that data, because you can get a nice, like you said, a nice good graph where it's nice and flat, and you keep a nice stable blood sugar without having to consume extra calories.
Yeah, and so you hit a nail on the head that I missed for sure, is that data point, and that if you don't have a CGM, then it becomes easy. You're always getting the data, right? But you definitely need to know what those numbers look like before you start messing with it. Like you said, have an idea. So if you want to use that kind of strategy, it might be better than to just plan on not doing anything and only reacting if you need to. But even then, you can still get data up to that point, and literally just say, this is just a pure experiment of I want to see what happens to my body. You do it a couple times, you get a feel for it.
Yeah, because you're not going to get it right the first time. You're going to try it. You're going to try a percentage, and it's probably not going to be right. But hey, you're going to see, all right, that wasn't enough or that was too much. And so then you can start saying, okay, this is how my body responds to this amount of percentage, because that's going to be different for everybody. Like and depending on, if you take a basal rate of, say, like 2 units per hour, which is quite a bit, which is something
really high.
which is actually where I was at in college when I was playing football. And then you take 90% of that, that's going to be a heck of a lot bigger drop than if you were at 1 unit per hour taking a 90% hit. So yeah, it's just something you got to play with, and you're not going to be good at it right away, but it's something you can get better and better at.
Mm-hmm. And to clarify that, the number that I said when I said like 70% or 90% is remaining. So if I was taking 1.0 as my basal rate, then I took 75%, it would be 0.75. That's what I mean. I'm not saying take 75% away or 90% away, just to clarify. Just a small change is what I'm referring to. But yeah, no, you're exactly right. It took me 16, no, how long was that first training cycle, that first marathon? 20 weeks? 20 weeks of training for a marathon and then completely failing and biffing, manage my blood sugar on a marathon, like absolutely messing that up for me to actually start to learn how I can run efficiently with my diabetes. So that's 20 plus weeks and 5 hours of hell that I put my body through specifically at that race to learn now how I can run, years later and manage way differently than I did then. You're going to mess up. You might hurt yourself, which you shouldn't. You should always try to avoid those types of things. But the reality of being insulin dependent is sometimes you're in scenarios that aren't ideal. It's just how it goes.
Yep.
So, yeah. But okay. So let's do a little different scenario then. Instead of stable at like 100, 120, let's say we're stable at a little bit lower of a blood sugar. I imagine for you this wouldn't be that much of a change. Like, let's say you're stable somewhere around like 70 to 80. You're kind of flirting the line of hypoglycemia, of that low blood sugar. You might not have low blood sugar symptoms. You've eaten at this point. You've been awake. You've ate something, but for like an hour, you're now stable 70 to 80 milligrams per deciliter going into leg day. How do you approach that?
So I think I would approach it 2 different ways depending on my day or depending on how I felt that day. So one being, if I was at that spot, I was stable, I may eat somewhat of a meal, maybe not a full meal, but I would probably eat something to bring my blood sugar up and not maybe shoot it up, but something that's going to bring it up nice and slowly. So that way, when I start my workout, it'll be raising up, but then my workout will help bring it back down. And so it'll keep it somewhat level. I think that would probably be my go-to, but again, depending on the situation, like maybe I'm in a hurry, I don't have time for that. Then at that point, I get to the gym and maybe either before or after, depending on how I'm feeling, like if I'm starting to have low blood sugar symptoms, then I will definitely drink a juice box right then. If not, if I feel fine, and then I check it and it's a little bit on that low side, but not terrible, then I may wait towards after my warm up and then drink a juice. But ultimately, if I don't have time to eat a meal, a little bit beforehand, then I'm gonna probably drink a juice box to mitigate that inevitable drop that's gonna happen, especially if it's already at that borderline. I know my body. I know it's gonna drop. If it's at that borderline, it's gonna drop because with that stability being there, I know it's gonna drop even with a little bit of exercise. Whereas maybe a higher stability, I'm like, I might be able to manage this because I think for whatever reason, my physiology, I just know at that lower level, it's going to be more volatile. So something to bring it up is going to bring it up a little bit quicker, and something to bring it down, like exercise, is going to bring it down quicker. So I know I need to do something when it's at that level.
Yeah, I agree. Definitely something, but I would definitely say what I've learned is you don't want to do too much,
Mm-hmm.
right? So you don't want to combine at that exact moment before the workout a juice box and some kind of fuel source
Yeah.
simultaneously, or you don't want to combine a juice box. And when we say juice box, we're just meaning like fast acting carbs. That's
Yeah.
almost like,
Yeah.
for you, literally, it's a juice box, but for me, it might be a swig of juice or glucose tabs or something like,
Yeah.
whatever you do. But you don't want to combine fast acting carbs and some fuel source. Or in the same way, I wouldn't want to combine a fuel source, like a fast acting fuel source, fast acting carbs, with changing my basal rate.
Yes.
Like that's too much at that point, because you will go high and you'll see that high drop low and kind of ride down if you do that. But then now you have this weird spike that has now made you a little more temporarily resistant uh, in your muscles to insulin, and your blood sugar homeostasis is now thrown off, and your body's trying to say, okay, what's going on right now? And so you'd spike a little higher, and as you drift down, you might, like, at the end of the workout just hit 100, but now you have this whole big area under the curve that your body doesn't know what to do with.
Mm-hmm.
And so I definitely think taking it slow and whatever strategy of eating something complex or having something fast, or maybe even then, if I was stable, I would say if I was stable, if I was going to do one thing, I was just going to change my basal rate, which I have done this before. I would do it at a much drastic rate. I would not eat anything, and I might say 50% basal rate, cut it in half. And then depending on if I know I have 20 minutes before, because of driving and like getting there and warming up or what have you, that then has a lot of time to kind of take effect. I might start be dipping a little bit low, so I might need like a single glucose tab or something along those lines. But I can space out the change in basal rate and maybe some fast acting, a small amount. Now the key is to be strict with it.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's really easy, and you and I have talked about this before, where if you're having something to treat low blood sugars, if you go haywire and you just eat everything because that's our instinct, that's when you're going to have lots of problems. And so
Mm-hmm.
if you're having low blood sugar, you need to have, that's why you use, I know specifically like juice boxes, because it's literally a confined amount, opposed to me chugging a bunch of apple juice I have in like a gallon form, in my fridge.
Mm-hmm.
That's the beauty of having a juice box. In a similar way, me changing my basal rate and then maybe 20, 30 minutes later consuming a single glucose tablet or two tops, depending on the scenario situation, that's a very controlled amount. That is 8 to 10 grams of fast acting dextrose with a change in basal rate that should probably get me through the whole thing. And now, but if I change my basal rate again, it's going to require more checking to make sure I don't drop low.
Mm-hmm.
And if I'm dropping low, what's the rate? How much do I need to change that? Do I need to just cancel the basal rate, or do I need to bring the basal rate back up? And the more you mess with the basal rate, you need to be ready to change it back up or bring it down even lower.
Mm-hmm.
And so this strategy is always more checking involved. And I'm totally fine with checking my blood sugar 5+ times in a single hour workout, because it gives me the data I need to be efficient with my blood sugar.
Mm-hmm.
Or maybe not efficient, but controlled.
Yeah.
So, and that brings up the point too, that if you are checking your blood sugar physically at a workout, you are having more peripheral blood flow. You are getting more blood flow to your fingertips. And if the lancet that you're using, you might not need as deep of a hit to your finger, or else you'll just be bleeding everywhere. Because I've definitely bled over bars specifically because I've checked my blood sugar, and then I think it dries, and then I put pressure in my arms, my body, and I'm like doing a squat or some kind of snatch or something. I move the bar and blood just goes everywhere on the bar, and it's like, well, I gotta clean that up now. And so you don't need to go as deep with your lancets when you have that blood,
Yeah.
that increased blood flow.
Have you ever had it to where you know how you kind of like milk your finger up and then all of a sudden it just squirts at you.
Well, not only does it squirt at me, but I have glasses, right? So sometimes
Oh
it's
yeah.
like a Dexter paint, like blood spattered paint screen across my glasses lens. I'm just like, oh Jesus, okay.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's happened at a workout. That's happened not at workouts, and it's just like squirted because it's like you just squeeze so hard. You're like, I know, and then it just comes
Yep.
all out.
Yeah, it scares you.
Yeah,
It's like, oh gosh.
yeah, that's definitely happened. Let's see. What's the? Do you have anything more comments on that scenario?
No, I think I covered what I wanted to.
Okay, so that was a stable low blood sugar or borderline scenario, right? Um, I also do want to, because it is different, and I do it enough where I'm sure you maybe do it too, and other people do it too. This idea of, you know, you read forums and you read articles of people getting benefits from fasted cardio or lifted fasted, you know, and that could be not necessarily you actually fasting, intermittent fasting, or doing an extended fast or something like that, but you literally just, you wake up after, you know, you ate dinner at 6, 7 p.m., didn't eat throughout the night, went to bed, and you're waking up first thing in the morning going to the workout, right? So both of these scenarios are a little bit different. At least I know it is for me with my responses.
Way different for me.
Uh, if I do it first thing in the morning and I'm, you know, quote unquote fasted, right? So maybe before the next scenario, which will be low blood sugar before a workout specifically, how does being stable at like 100 when you wake up and you're fasted, going to leg day with maximal effort, differ from fasted in the morning, leg day, maximal effort, and you're like floating around 80? How does that change things for you when you throw that fat, quote unquote, fasted element into it?
So with fasted, um, my blood sugar response is completely opposite. So my
Mm-hmm.
cortisol is higher, and then I go and do a stressful event like exercise, and my blood sugar shoots up. So if I do anything fasted, it can be running, it can be leg day, it can be anything. My blood sugar is going to go up. So, so I have to respond to that. So I will take, if I go into it fasted, I will either eat, and like if I know I'm going to go in the morning, I'll either eat a little bit. It doesn't have to be a big meal. I can eat just a little bit, and it's enough. And it can be something that's not going to change my blood sugar at all. You know, it's, you know, meat or something like that, a small portion of meat.
Or
That's
eggs.
that's or eggs. Yep, that's really not going to change my blood sugar at all. But it does change my response. So just by eating that little bit, I don't have that high spike in the workout, um, and it'll also help stabilize my blood sugar, so I won't have a, you know, serious low either. I may still get a little bit low, but it's usually a little bit better if I have a little bit of protein in there to help keep it more stable. Now, if I decide I don't have any time, I'm just gonna go fasted, or I just feel like going fasted because for whatever reason I'm not hungry or don't have time or whatever, then I'll take insulin before I work out. And so, like you said before, the insulin is going to be spread around faster, so it's going to act faster. So I will take it either right before or maybe during like my first set of working out, like working set, because it's going to hit much quicker. And it's usually not a ton. It's maybe like 1 or 2 units is usually enough to mitigate that spike. But I definitely need something, because if I go without, I will spike pretty darn high, like in the either 200s and sometimes not necessarily 300s. I never go that high, but like, you know,
Oh,
maybe mid 200s. It can be as high as that. So if I, and even, I mean, just that little bit of insulin is enough to kind of mitigate that spike. So, you know, normally the correction factor for that high of blood sugar is usually much higher than that. But if I hit it beforehand, it'll be, you know, I can just take those, you know, 2 units and it's going to be fine. But if I wait till after I get high, then I still have to take that higher correction factor to get it to come back down, because that stress response has already started up in my body. And so it's going to be harder to then bring it back down. So if I catch it Beforehand, it usually takes much less, and it's obviously easier on my body because it'll stay much more level. But if I forget about it and it ends up getting high, then I gotta take a bunch of insulin for it to bring it back down.
So again, this is for not a HIIT workout. This is for a high effort leg day workout.
It could be,
That
for
you
me,
would,
it could be either one.
okay. Because mine, and when you say you get, maybe 200 is mid 200s for a workout like this, is that a quick spike or is that a gradual raise?
It's
If you did give yourself that insulin you mentioned.
it is usually it's somewhat slow at the beginning, like it's usually fairly level until it decides to start raising, and then it's a big spike from there.
Okay. That's interesting. I definitely don't get that response personally. It's interesting just, the how wound up you are from a nervous system perspective, your state of insulin sensitivity. It does play a role in these background physiology responses. And, it's not just you're you and that's your genetics. It's purely, this is just that your current state based on other life factors and other, things that I just mentioned. But anyways, I don't get a giant spike like that. If I am fasted, going to high intensity, not a HIIT workout, it will only be gradual. Now, it will be hard to mitigate it, like you said, if you don't get ahead of it and you don't, try to give insulin before it gets up there. But it will just be like a drummer boy. It will just constantly just keep going up and up and up, and it will be hard to battle that. Now, I've learned, and I'm a little more hesitant to give a bolus of fast acting insulin during a workout because I've crashed during a workout before. I know even endocrinologists are worried. And so this is, again, we already have a medical disclaimer, but again, we're not telling you how to dose your insulin. We're talking about our personal experiences and what you may or may not do. And always consult your doctors and your medical team before implementing any new strategies. But for me, I would do a basal rate, but I would try to do a high percentage basal rate, anywhere from like 140 to 160%, and try to do it as soon as possible if I know I'm fasted, for a high effort leg day. Now, that then does become different if we're doing a HIIT workout, a CrossFit workout, something like that. That does change things then too, for me. But typically, if I'm fasted going into a workout, I will then just go up and up and up and up over time. And then sometimes even then with a basal rate, a higher percentage basal rate, maybe then I'll give like half a unit or one. I'm much more cautious, and I would rather pay and be cautious afterwards because I know my insulin sensitivity is going to be higher after the workout anyways. And so I know that I can use still a small amount of insulin as long as it's not gotten too high, past 200, then it's a lot easier to kind of manage in the back end too. So then my strategy is then, as long as it's not above 200, if it's around like 160 and that's kind of where it's floated to and kind of stable at afterwards, then I'm okay with it. But it definitely doesn't spike high unless I'm doing a literal HIIT type workout.
Yeah, I got you.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I
But
think I was maybe a little bit misleading with HIIT versus high intensity. For me,
or
like,
high effort. Let's use the word high effort versus
yeah,
HIIT.
high effort. So that the high effort was what I was describing my response to. High intensity, like I said, it's very similar. It probably isn't quite as much of a spike high, because I do feel like the high intensity is gonna fight that high a little bit more so than the high effort stuff will. So I probably that one I will definitely probably check my blood sugar a little bit more. Like if I can get a break in between those things, or like obviously since I have a CGM, I can just look at it, which is really nice. So that way you're not taking time out of your workout. But I will try and monitor a little bit more to see if I need to take some insulin. If I can get away with not taking it, or at the very least, maybe taking less insulin. So maybe taking like 1 unit or 1.5 units to mitigate it versus like, 2 or 2.5 versus where I would be taking or where I'd be doing the high effort workout.
That's interesting. It makes sense. So I'm gonna try to explain why it wouldn't be as high of a spike in a HIIT workout for you. It would be more so because a HIIT workout, you're breathing heavy, you have a higher oxygen demand, you're using more of this cardio feature of no breaks, go, 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 which is a more metabolically demanding overall type thing, where opposed to your body catching up and spitting out cortisol, right? Because you have this aspect that is almost a cardio aspect of it with the high, whether it be reps, weight, whatever, the combination of it almost, you're saying, it creates not as high of a spike as if you were just doing a high effort leg day. Is that kind of maybe the explanation you think about in your head?
Yeah. But it's also kind of weird because like if I were to go for a run fasted, and when I say
Yeah,
fasted,
let's not talk about running. That's even
okay,
its own thing.
all right, we'll cut it off right there.
Okay, yeah, because that has its own thing, and we got a couple other scenarios to get into.
All right.
But if you can continue your thought without talking about running, please do so.
No.
No. All right. So we talked about adding the fasting aspect in. So now let's go back into you've eaten. We're at the stability level. I'm going to combine this too to see if we can make it a little bit faster. So you're stable, but you're stable high. So meaning you just, whether because you haven't paid attention, it seems weird, like almost oxymoron, you're stable high, like, but the point is you're not yo-yoing is the point of this. You're stable high. You're maybe you weren't paying attention, or maybe you're sick and you've been fighting cortisol or something like that, but you're like constant like 220 plus, right? Oh, let's say 200, 220. Maybe like you're not as high as like 280 because that's almost even like a different scenario, I guess. Yeah. So like you're stable around 200 to 220 for an hour plus. You've eaten all this and that, and as well as a similar scenario of, for whatever reason, you haven't treated a low blood sugar, but you have eaten that day, and for like an hour you've been at like 60, right? Let's do the latter first. Let's do the stable at 60. I feel like we almost kind of talked about that, but you're actually low, right? You're actually low going into the workout. How does that change things?
All right. So if I'm low, it also depends a little bit on how low I am. I know you said 60, but like, that's not terribly low for me. So like, if I'm like 50 or lower, I would definitely eat somewhat of a meal. Like I said, it doesn't have to be a full meal, but it needs to have something with protein that's going to help stabilize my blood sugar. Um, and so in that, if I have something that has carbs in it, then I may just leave it at that, and that'll be enough to bring it back up. Or if it's something that's like purely protein or purely fat, that's really not going to necessarily affect my blood sugar too much, then if I'm low, I may also have a little bit of juice or a fast acting carb to bring it up, and then that other stuff will help keep it up at that level. And so I'll have that beforehand. Obviously, with the meal, it's probably going to be before I even leave the house or leave work or whatever. And then if I do decide to have a fast acting carb, that's going to be basically right before, whether that's right before my warm up or maybe even right before I start getting into my first exercise. Um, just to make sure that it's not spiking beforehand and then it's going to turn into that yo-yo situation. I kind of want to time it so that way it's a nice, slow, and stable increase, and then it hopefully will stay at that good level that I want it at.
Yeah, I would agree with that strategy. Even if you want to play with your pump, if you're low, you gotta treat the low.
Yeah.
Like, you gotta do some combination of that. Be what you suggested and what your strategy is to combine, some carbs with a meal, and hopefully it goes up and then it becomes stable, and then you don't have to think about it. If you just have fast acting carbs and then wait for it, that's fine. I've done that before, but know that you might drop lower faster,
Yeah.
because it's a temporary bump per se. It's literally a bump in blood sugar that you'll quickly burn through if you don't have food to stabilize it, or then playing with basal rates or something like that, then to try to slow down the drop from the workout.
Yep.
But yeah, you gotta treat the low. You gotta wait. Like you said, you would do it at work, you do it at home before you leave, and kind of just make sure that things are going up.
Mm-hmm.
It's never fun when you treat a low, get to the gym and you're still low,
Yeah.
and you're like, what the hell, you know. That's because then you got to eat more, you got to drink more, and maybe you're too nervous that you might keep dropping. So maybe you just sit and wait at the gym, and it's like, why the heck am I here when I could be sitting and waiting at home or something like that?
Yeah.
So
Yeah. I think it's a good point to have something in your system to help stabilize it, because like you said, if you just have and depending on how long it's been since you've eaten, if it's been a while, so like 3, 4, 5 hours since you last eaten, but it's still, it's stable at that lower end, um, it's still been a while. And so just that spike, that quick spike with the quick acting glucose, it's probably not going to last very long. Um, and so it's going to drop quick again. So with that scenario, I would really suggest, for me, I would definitely try and eat something that's going to help stabilize it a little bit better. So if I'm going to bring it up with quick acting, I need to have something to help stabilize it too. So that way I don't have to keep drinking or keep having glucose tabs to keep bringing it back up, because fighting lows when you're trying to work out is like it's just the worst, because the workout just kind of goes to hell, because you're constantly just fighting lightheadedness, and so that way at that point you can't really push yourself as hard because you're worried about am I gonna pass out when I do this, or whatever it is. So trying to help keep it stable, whether you're doing basal rates with it, that can help that too. But I always like using food to help stabilize it. And also another
I
thing
will
to keep.
say,
Oh, go ahead.
no. Mine was gonna be a tangent. Go finish your
Okay.
thought.
Another thing to keep in mind is if you do eat a meal and it ends up being something that's going to put you higher, um, so you need to take insulin for it, then you also need to keep in mind that you're going to be doing a workout. And so you may not take as much insulin for it. So, like, if I decide to eat a meal that has carbs in it, and I know, hey, this is too much carbs for the correction that I need, and so I'm going to end up being high. So I do need to take insulin for it. I just know I don't need to take as much insulin for it, because my insulin sensitivity is going to change when I start to do that workout. And at the same time, like we said before, that insulin is going to kick in much quicker. And so you may end up then dropping back low again, because you have too much insulin in the system.
hmm I think our last guest Jay was saying that he doesn't he does everything he possibly can to make sure he doesn't have insulin on board, or rather a recent bolus of insulin prior to working out.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes it is what it is. Now his whole insulin strategy is way different than what you and I are talking about. Like, his insulin strategy is with a medium lasting insulin on a carnivore diet. That's a completely different diet and literal insulin than what the standard American, Australian, UK, anybody has, because it's the most common insulin,
Mm-hmm.
um, of fast acting insulin, right? So that's even way different. But yeah, what your point's still true. If you have insulin on board, you can burn through your blood sugar way faster, because you gave yourself more than you needed to for the meal when you pair it with the workout.
Yeah.
So But you were talking about like low blood sugars and having low blood sugars and fighting low blood sugars throughout the workout. I will say, I have had a PR, or personal record best, uh, in the middle of a low blood sugar. I was doing an overhead press, strict overhead press, and my blood sugar afterwards was like 34 after this rep. But I was like maxing out an overhead press. I wasn't paying attention. My blood sugar tanked. And because of the pure adrenaline, the epinephrine that my adrenal medulla just pushed into my blood, that I was so excited that I just could push this weight above my head, and it felt great. And then I put it down. I was like, oh my gosh. And I almost like fell to my knee, checked my blood sugar 34. I was like, that was great, but I gotta go like, take care of this in the locker room. So if you do have low blood sugar, you might want to capitalize and really fast to use the adrenaline, or you could just be safe and not an idiot like myself and take care of your health and make sure you're safe.
Yeah. Yeah, I've never purposely used my adrenaline to do a lift, but I've definitely had similar situations to where I was doing like, a max out or a really, really max effort thing where I was trying to go as heavy as I possibly could. And, going into it, I felt relatively fine. And then as soon as I set the weight down, I'm like, holy cow. And that's when it really hit me. Like, obviously, people get lightheaded anyways when you do heavy lifting like that. But it was totally different because it was like, oh, this is a low blood sugar. So you go and check it, and it's like 30. I'm like, all right, juice box time.
Yep, exactly. I haven't purposely like been low to do that. Like I haven't done that. But now since that event, if I'm low and I feel like I'm lifting good, I'm like, I can ride this out a little bit more.
Yeah.
I was telling somebody at the gym the other day, when I'm at the gym, because they were just making fun of me for like not thinking through things and just my weird presence in the gym. And I was like, I use my brain so intensely outside of the gym that when I'm inside, I don't like to use my brain. I just gotta do things. I like to just be a pure meathead in there. And then I can use my brain in clinical thinking and think through biochemistry and TCA cycles and whatever else I need to throughout the day outside the gym. But when I'm in the gym, brain's off. I'm just I'm just throwing weight around.
Yeah.
But okay. So we've talked about all these things from a stable point. There's only two more that I think we really want to, and this is almost exhausting to talk about as it is. Like we've been talking a long time about scenarios.
Yeah.
And to anybody who's a type 2 or not diabetic, these are all the things that a diabetic needs to consider.
Mm-hmm.
Like literally at every moment of every day. So
yeah,
I'm exhausted just verbalizing it. Imagine if you don't live it, imagine thinking about this all the time. And
yeah,
that
every single day, every moment of every single day.
Yeah, like I legitimately am like, man, is this podcast gonna be over yet? Like, I don't think anybody's negatively talked about their own podcast on a recording before.
Yeah.
Maybe that's a first. It's like, congratulations, Garrett. All right. Anyways, so two more topics I want to make sure we hit is one more stable of you're stable but high, like we introed, but then the yo-yo effect,
Yep.
like so. Then let's try to talk about yo-yo because that's probably the most confusing one. That how likely most people have some kind of yo-yoing that they're going into a workout too, right? Like not many people are just stable all the time where they can use these scenarios. That's why I kind of use the range of like an hour. Like maybe if you're stable for an hour, you can get these effects. But the yo-yo and just kind of drastically going up and down is probably more common to that average, insulin dependent diabetic. But before that, you're stable and high, 200, 220, something like that, milligrams per deciliter for an hour plus you've eaten. How does that change things?
Yeah. So I think I see two different scenarios even within that. So one of them being you have a stable high blood sugar and you've been trying to get it down, but it's still stable at that high blood sugar.
Okay.
So in that scenario, obviously frustration starts to set in, and I get very frustrated. With that, in general, I'm a hard person to get angry, and I'm pretty calm. But when it comes to my diabetes and my blood sugar, man, it just sets me off like that. And I can get pretty frustrated. So at that point, I will oftentimes take either the amount that I'm supposed to take for that correction factor, sometimes even more so because I've been trying to get it to come back down. And then I go and work out as hard as I possibly can because my goal that day is to bring that dang blood sugar down. And so I'll take as much insulin as it takes to come back down, even if it, requires me to crash. I want that thing to come back down because I've been trying to get it to come back down. So I'll take, in that scenario, I'll take at least the correction factor that I'm supposed to take in a normal situation. I'll take at least that much. If not, depending on how hard I've been struggling to bring it back down, sometimes I'll take more than that. And then I'll go, like I said, I'll work out as hard as I possibly can to help drive that insulin into the cells and, get it flying around so that way it spreads out faster and gets it to come down. However, with a blood sugar that's stable at a higher level, like that 200, 220 range, that wasn't necessarily because I couldn't bring it down. It was maybe because I just didn't have the opportunity. Like I was working, and then I go back and check my CGM, and it's been high. I'm like, oh crap, I haven't been paying attention to it, so it's been high. At that time, I will take probably around half as much correction factor for that, and then go work out if I can work out, like right away. So like say, I was working or doing something, wasn't really paying attention to my blood sugar. I check it either right before I head out to the gym or when I get to the gym, I check it and see that it's been high and stable. Then I'll take maybe half of that right then and know that it's going to come back down with just that little bit of insulin. And it's going to come down relatively quickly. So yeah, those are my two scenarios that I usually do.
I think those are good that you pointed out those two scenarios because it's like the first one that you spent a lot of time talking on. You were trying to get it down, so there could be a large variety of reasons on why it's high and you can't get it down. It could be you're sick, could be you're stressed, could be a kink in your pump,
Yep.
could be a whole bunch of things, or you did give yourself enough Lancet or Lantus or whatever your long-lasting insulin is. For whatever reason, you're high and you can't get it down. But what happens is if you're stable and you can't get it down, the longer you're in that physiology state, the more inflammation, the more cytokines, the more interrupting messengers of all your other hormones there are. So when you inject the hormone that is insulin, it's going to have a harder effect to be utilized in the same way. And that is a very different scenario than if you're high just because you've been creeping up high, you didn't give enough insulin at lunch, and like you said, you were going at work, and then you just notice you're like 200, and it was a steady climb up. You're stable, but like for whatever reason, it was more of a randomness thing compared to my physiology is working against me at this point.
Mm-hmm.
And those two, I think, you hit it right on the head. I would maybe even that I scolded you for saying, let's not talk about running, but you could throw cardio in there, right? Like real fast, maybe 5-10 minutes, something like that. And that will get your blood flowing, kind of get things moving a lot. Just as long as make sure you have that insulin rate, you're not changing it to be lower for any reason. It needs to be the same, if not higher, at that point. But you got to be careful. Well, I'm not gonna go down that route. So yeah, you can throw that in there. What I would do is I would increase the basal rate once again. I'd raise it to like 160% if I can. Sometimes with the pump, it depends on what you have your programmed basal rates at. That I've noticed that will, if it's already supposed to be a higher rate at that time, sometimes it does or doesn't let you go to a certain percentage. Sometimes it only lets me go to 135%. Sometimes it lets me go to 160%. This is with both with an older Medtronic model and the G670 that I have now. I've noticed both of those limitations on there. So that, and then I would maybe combine that with an actual insulin dosage as well. But like you said, you're kind of going in there trying to be a little more heavier, a little more max effort type thing. But sometimes it's hard. If you're sluggish, because your blood sugars, we've talked about how that can affect sports performance in the past, right? That's going to affect your willingness to go hard if you feel like crap because of your high blood sugar. So knowing that, and knowing that it might be a little harder to give max effort, it's okay. Like if you're not able to give the effort you think you need to, it's a purely physiological thing. It's not a self-worth thing. Don't beat yourself up if that's hard for you.
Yeah. And at the same time, I think at least, and this is kind of just my mindset on that scenario. Like if it's not necessarily about the output, or I should say the outcome. So like you may not lift as much weight or be able to lift as much weight. For me in that scenario, it's just about going as hard as I can in that moment to help bring it down. And so whatever that looks like, It doesn't really matter to me. It's just the goal is let's bring it down.
Yeah, that's a very good point. Your goals then need to change what your intention is going into the gym. Some people's intention is to lose weight. Some people it's to lift a lot. Some people it's just to feel good. But whatever it is, if you're high in that scenario, either of those scenarios, you might have to give up whatever goals you have to combat your insulin or to combat your blood sugar. And that's purely okay, because you're not going to get a PR if your blood sugar is high. You're just not.
Yeah.
So give up that thought that you're going to have an amazing workout. You might still feel really good afterwards, but it's still not just going to be the same as if you were stable at 100. Like it's just two black and white scenarios that are different. And so giving up that your initial goal to now my goal is my blood sugar and my health, my life, and I can still get the positive effects of working out in so many other ways. But the first immediate goal is now my blood sugar control compared to lifting whatever weight I said I was going to lift earlier in the day.
Yeah.
So, yeah. And then what about the yo-yo effect? This is almost kind of hard to describe. Like, what would you do scenario? Because yo-yo could mean you're high and then you're about to drop low, or you're low and you're about to spike high. So I don't know necessarily how we're gonna approach this scenario, but so we'll just say the yo-yo effect. What do you do if you're yo-yoing? Do you just wait? Do you maybe like not wait or not wait? You wait and you don't lift at all, or what do you do?
Yeah. So I think for me, it depends on where I'm at in that yo-yo. So if I'm going high again, I'm like, gosh darn it, I'm going high again and I can't control it. Then that's when I'm probably going to definitely lean towards doing the workout. Now I will say, I know in our notes we have like using workouts to help stabilize it. And, is that a good idea? And I think just from my experience of my body, it's a good idea for me to do something to shake things up. You kind of have to fight chaos with chaos, at least in my body. And so doing some sort of exercise or something to kind of clear the slate is something that I need to do to help keep things or get things back to normal. So I will use exercise to help get me out of that yo-yo. And so, ideally that's going to be when I start going back high again. So I'll use exercise to help bring it back down. So if it's going high again, I'll, depending on the situation, for the most part, I'll probably stick with doing that less correction factor because I am doing that yo-yo. So I'll do less of a correction factor and then try and work out and to bring it back down. Now you are in a yo-yo, so it may come crashing back down a little bit. But if you can, again, either have something to help stabilize the blood sugar, or like with Garrett, you change your basal rate. But let's talk about it in regards to or a MDI situation, because that's kind of how I do things. I would maybe have something to stabilize my blood sugar, like some sort of meat source that's not a lot. So very little just to help with that stability aspect, but then have, if it's going up, like I said, to have maybe a little bit of that correction factor, not the whole correction factor, and then go and do, a hard leg day and realize that it may come down, it may get low, but for the most part, in my experience with my body, if I have that stability factor in there with that protein, it's not going to crash hard and then go back into that yo-yo situation. A lot of times it may still go low, but it's going to be much slower, and then my correction with the juice box or whatever is going to bring it back up, and a lot of times after that, then it starts to normalize, because with that workout, like we've talked about, it's going to change your insulin sensitivity and change a whole lot of your about your metabolism, to where, and your hormones and your stress response and all that changes after you do a workout. And so for me, it kind of clears the slate and helps me stabilize back. Now, if it's going on the low end of things, coming back down on that yo-yo, then I'll have my, correction. So my juice box, maybe 2 juice boxes if I know that, hey, it's going to be crashing hard. And then on top of this, I'm doing a workout. So maybe I'll do 2 juice boxes, and then do a hard workout, monitoring my blood sugar the whole time. Because at this point, blood sugar is kind of controlling my day. So it's going to probably be interrupting my workout more so than it usually does. And so I'm going to be checking it a little bit more often to make sure, all right, did it come back up, and is it continuing to rise, or is it now starting to level back off, or maybe going back down again? So I may have more juice boxes in that day just to kind of to fight it. But for the most part, after that workout, it's going to be more stable, at least for me in my experience. It's going to be more stable after that, after I get it back under control.
Yeah, I think I agree with those um, strategies. I think the importance is of the last one is to recognize it's almost then a different scenario if you're high and then all of a sudden you start to plummet, like you were saying, like you're just dropping low. That is now, like you said, you're going an uphill battle, you know. And for me, if I was doing a leg workout, I guess like this, yeah, I would I would have juice boxes and I would try to ride it and just battle it. I can't. It's almost like for me at that point, it's unpredictable. Like I know what it's gonna do, but it might spike up a little more, or it might barely budge. But now, like you said, it's gonna change things for post workout. It's gonna change metabolism, insulin sensitivity in the short term, and it's going to change things afterwards too. So it's worth the effort in that leg workout to try to balance it. But if you are, let's say, sometimes like I'll be super high for a long time at night because I mismanaged my sleep and blood sugar for sleep, and then I give myself a lot of insulin and I start crashing. And now I'm going to yo-yo. Like even that I haven't yo-yoed yet, I've gone from a high plateau to a drastic skydive off of that cliff, figuratively, of the blood sugar. Now I know I'm going to yo-yo because I need to eat something. And because I see the rate of how fast I'm falling, I might eat too much. And then you throw in the actual, because it's in the morning or something like that, now you have a little more cortisol coming out from the workout too. It's almost so unpredictable. I would say for a leg workout, like you said, it is worth doing it and trying to battle through it. Now, other types of workouts, that might not be the case. Definitely when, again, not talking about running in detail, but I know if I was like that prior to a run, especially a long run, I'm not running right away. I'm waiting to stabilize that, because that's a different type of workout. But that's maybe a scenario, especially if you're new to try to figure out how to balance your blood sugar and lift like this. That's a different scenario to say, I just don't feel comfortable. I got to stabilize first. And that's okay too. sometimes I know you've done that as well. I know plenty of other diabetics have said, I got to wait to work out. And it's an awful feeling because saying you have to do something because your diabetes is the most disempowering part
Yeah.
of diabetes, especially when you're trying to do something like work out, do something for you, your mindset, your body, for all these other goals, this reason. And it's a constant reminder that this disease is chronic and it's not going anywhere. And sometimes it's gonna flip the middle finger to you and try to take control. And so sometimes you have to take a step back, try to stabilize it, and then you can work out later in the day. But if it's a true leg workout, even this max effort, chances are it's worth battling through with insulin and with the lows, with juice boxes, and to try to just get through the workout because it'll help stabilize you post workout much easier than if you didn't.
Yeah, and I think that's true in regards, like, I guess I was talking coming from a mindset of like it's been yo-yoing for most of the day. Now, in your scenario that you brought up, as far as like first thing in the morning, it's high. Now it's coming crashing down. I think my mindset would be a little bit different in the fact that I would probably try, especially if it's on that downslope, I'd probably try and make sure it's somewhat stable before I go out. But yeah, if it's like constantly throughout the day and you're just like, I can't get a control of this, then sometimes I'll just use exercise as that another chaos thrown into the fire to help bring it back to normal. And you kind of alluded to this, but like the workout may just be a total disaster, and you may be like the workout itself, but then also just like your handling of the blood sugar during that workout may just be a total disaster. It's still kind of going all up and down throughout that workout. But after that workout, if you can make it through that, that's usually when all those hormones and that stress response starts to normalize things again, and you get kind of back to that baseline. And so after the workout is usually when you start seeing those results as far as getting your body back into more of a normal situation.
Yeah, the battle, man. I just can hear like Jocko Willing's voice just say, "Fight,
Yeah,
do it," or something along those lines. Yeah, because sometimes that's just what it is. Like you just gotta fight your diabetes because it's trying to win the battle, and this is a war that you can't afford to lose. And it's just your life, your value, your goals are too important to say I can't work out. Just in general. I said sometimes you gotta wait, but in general, like to just say I can't work out, I can't do that because of my blood sugar. And that's something you absolutely can do. Absolutely, you can do it. And it starts with data, starts with confidence, starts with willingness to do it. Know you're going to fail, you're going to mess up, but you're going to learn and do more. But having that data to back you up and that experience by just doing it is how you move forward with all that. So, yeah. Whew. Talked about a lot.
Yep.
And again, this is what insulin dependent diabetics think about all the damn time, and this is just for working out, for one type of workout. I mean, I guess, we use the example of leg day, and it is a little different with other body parts and other workouts, but I think leg day is a special exception. So, we can maybe have other ideas, like you and I are chiropractors, right, Grady? So like we can talk about the biomechanics of the squat, maybe, and how certain tissue types affect metabolism differently, and get really nerdy and technical about some things, maybe in future podcasts, or we talk about future different types of lifts, like more shoulders or running, or this and that. But I think this is something that I know we've gotten a couple listener questions to discuss some of this stuff, and I think it's step number one. You want to work out, you want to get healthy as a type 1 diabetic, you got to move, and this is part of that moving. And you don't need to know the science, you don't need to know crazy biochemistry or physiology. You just need to know your own data and learn a little bit about your physiology and just kind of go for it.
Yep, it's all about that data.
All about that data. We'll make that into a shirt too somehow.
Oh yeah,
That gives me some ideas. But anyways, so that kind of wraps up, this leg day discussion from Quadzilla and I over here. But so we'll wrap it up with a we'll burst my beta cells, and it can be non-diabetic related to something recently, or maybe let's do like a let's not even do a burst my beta cells. We just spent a whole time talking about like blood sugar. Let's not do burst my beta cells. Let's just say, so what was the like frustrating thing in the gym recently? Some workout frustration that you've had recently. Let's do that.
Oh.
If you need a minute to think about it, I got one.
All right, you go first.
So, like I kind of said in the beginning of the podcast, I was overhead squatting this morning. So that literally means a barbell is above your head in a far-reaching grip, and then you're squatting down in the hole. So opposed to the bar being on your back, it's up in the air, and it takes shoulder mobility to do so. I have not overhead squatted a whole lot. And it's an Olympic type lift, and it's its own thing, a whole different skill set. But it was frustrating because, like an idiot, I forgot even it was in kilograms, so it's all imaginary numbers to me, anyways, at this point. But it was a decent amount of weight. And after 2 reps, I tried stopping the set, and I tried receiving the load. So I tried receiving the bar. And I totally just screwed up my neck. I mean, thank God I'm a chiropractor and there's other chiropractors around me, but man, my neck is so jacked up from just like improper form and not finishing that set and rep in a safe manner. And it's just frustrating because even after so many years of lifting fun and experience, like I'm doing something new and I still messed up, and I haven't been felt an injury. It's not even a real injury, but it's just, something on my mind all day to like, man, I really messed up in that lift. And so that was something fun and frustrating about lifting recently today. So
I got you. Yeah. Something that really frustrates me seems like every time I'm in the gym, and I'm sure a lot of people feel the same way about this, but when the weights are not put back properly, gosh darn it. It just bothers the heck out of me. Like if they're not put back on the right one, like there's a bunch of different amounts of weights on the same like weight horn. Like what the heck?
Mm-hmm.
Especially when the number is written on the weight horn and you still can't put it on the right one. It's like, what are we doing here?
It says like it's 25 pounds, and then there's a bunch of like 10s and 5s or something like that. And
or like a 45
in the 5.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Gosh. Or when like people just literally they will lean it on the weight horn and not put it on. It's like it is easier to put it on the weight horn than to put it right there where you put it. What are you doing?
I'm laughing because there's so much emotion in your voice.
Yes. It bothers the heck out of me.
Oh man. So then the question then is, do you go and fix it or do you leave it?
I fix it. Even if it's not on the weight equipment that it's on and I see it over there, I'm like, gosh. So I put it back and I fix it.
What a good citizen you are. You are a true unsung hero of the gym. Oh man. Yeah, it's that frustrates me too. Not as like it'll frustrate me in the moment. I won't like ever go home and think about it. Like, I mean, obviously you were thinking about something that frustrated you, so it's not like it was in forefront of your mind. But I've never been like, oh, friggin' the weights were everywhere today. Like, I've never thought that. Oh man, that's funny though. That's good. All right. Well, thanks everyone for tuning in, and hopefully you got some value out of it. And so, as always, we appreciate you listening. We appreciate you sharing the podcast and share those who rate and write reviews for it, because I've noticed recently that there's more reviews than last time I checked. So thank you to all those, and we appreciate those and continue to do so. And we can continue to spread messages to those who need it and to help people live the life they deserve. So thank you very much.
Yep. And as always, continue to ask questions, contact us. We're happy to help out and give advice, or just to vent to each other on bursting our beta cells. But don't be afraid to shout out to us and interact with us, because we love it.
That's right. So without further ado, then we'll see you on the next squat rack of the Diabuddies podcast.
See ya.
Thank you so much for listening to today's episode. If you found value in today's conversation, we would appreciate it if you gave a 5-star review. It really helps us branch out our community and get our message across to those who really need to hear it. If you want to interact with us on social media, you can follow us on the Diabuddies podcast on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. Or if you have any questions, comments, concerns, or moral outrages, you can email us at thediabuddiespodcast@gmail.com. Thanks.